he started the year saying he was Mr. Steady. Then at his conference, he was Mr. Change. Now he's flipped back to Mr. More of the same. Doesn't matter how many relaunches, flip-flops he does, he'll always be Mr. Nobody. Back in 2022, when Boris Johnson claimed he would send asylum seekers to Rwanda, one ambitious Tory MP had reservations. He agreed with Labour that it wouldn't work. It was a waste of money. It was the latest in a long line of gimmicks. Does the Prime Minister know what happened to that MP?
Well, Mr. Speaker, what that honourable gentleman refers to is a document that he hasn't seen, I haven't seen, and has been reported second-hand in a bunch of media newspapers. But what I can tell him is, I am absolutely clear that you do need to stop the boats, and that's what this government and that MP is going to deliver.
Keir Starmer taking the view that the post office is the post office. He said what he needs to say about it, but there is a more fruitful line of political inquiry.
What a surprise.
Not least with the Rwanda bill back in the Commons next week, and Tory MPs on the right of the party lining up to say that they're not happy with it. For the avoidance of doubt, if you haven't been following this story closely over the weekend, the BBC got hold of some papers which suggested that Rishi Sunak had significant doubts about sending migrants to Rwanda when he was Chancellor. They suggested he wanted to scale back Number 10's original plans. He wasn't sure if they'd stop channel crossings. And obviously since then, he's made it one of his top priorities. Quite a funny way into it from Keir Starmer.
Yes, all right. I mean, yeah. Is he now going to reveal to the Prime Minister his own identity at the start of question 2? Yes, no, it's fine. And it's perfectly, sensible line of attack. I thought the PM's answer was quite interestingly dismissive there. He took quite a while to start talking. He was a little bit wrong-footed, didn't quite know which direction to go. And then we get a bunch of media newspapers. Oh, the wicked media. Well, firstly, as you rightly point out, it was firstly on the BBC, not a bunch of media newspapers. I'm not quite sure what non-media newspapers would look like.
The ones done by councils.
But the PM does find questions. He finds questions from the media. He finds questions from this Starmer chap. Really quite irritating to his general well-being, and that's coming across already, which is, you're not normally a bit hissy-fitty in question one.
Crucially, in that answer was not a denial of the central charge that when he was Chancellor, he thought that the Rwanda policy was a daft idea.
Well, I mean, it's his job as Chancellor to say we need value for money and it must work. Maybe he did think it was a daft idea. A lot of people share that view, of course, but, the way politics works, you inherit the policy as Prime Minister, and frankly, you've got to make it work. Otherwise, you're in a world of pain with a certain section of voters and with your own party. So Rishi Sunak it's one of those areas, again, where just a little bit of candour about these things might actually take him a long way. But instead, I've never seen this document. Oh, right.
But also, if you said, yes, I did raise questions about value for money, those questions were answered. Now I think it's a great idea, and that's why I'm playing on with it.
That's another way you could answer
that. It's slightly better than saying, it was basically not a denial to say, this is something in the papers, you've not seen it, I've not seen it, and then we're going to talk about something else. Anyway, let's go back to the House of Commons then, because clearly Keir Starmer's decided that Rwanda is the way to go today.
I notice he didn't deny it, Mr. Speaker. I'm not surprised. £400 million of taxpayer money down the drain. No one sent to Rwanda. Small boats still coming. It's hardly a surprise. He wanted to scrap the scheme when he was trying to sneak in as Tory leader. But he's been caught red-handed opposing the very thing that he's now made his flagship policy. Which member should we listen to? The one before us today, or the one who used to believe in something?
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've always been crystal clear. You do need to have an effective deterrence to finally solve this problem. In fact, the National Crime Agency agree that you need, in their words, an effective removals and deterrence agreement. And that's why, after becoming Prime Minister, I negotiated a new deal with Albania, thanks to which we have seen a 93% drop in illegal arrivals from Albania. That's how Australia stopped the boats. That's why Italy, Germany and Austria are all looking at similar schemes. He's the only one who's opposed to a proper deterrent. Not because it doesn't work, because he doesn't actually believe in controlling migration, Mr. Speaker. Every single time he picks the people smugglers over the British people.
Mr. Speaker, we should smash the gangs, process the claims and end hotel use. That's our plan. And unlike the Prime Minister, I believe in it. But
I'm going to hear the questions. I don't want interruptions, please. It's very important. It's a very important topic, and I take it seriously. I hope members also wish to start taking it seriously. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, last year he started the year saying he was Mr. Steady. Then at his conference he was Mr. Change. Now he's flipped back to Mr. More of the same. Doesn't matter how many relaunches, flip-flops he does, he'll always be Mr. Nobody. And here's the tragedy of his leadership. He spends the whole time trying to convince people not to believe their own eyes, pretending that debt is falling, that the economy is going gangbusters, the NHS is in great shape. When he finally finds something he was right about, the Rwanda gimmick, he can't even take credit for it. When's he going to stop pretending that up is down, that black is white, admit that whether it's the economy, immigration, the NHS, he has failed?
Mr. Speaker, well, let's just go through his checklist. He talks about the backlog, 112,000 decisions made last year, a higher number than in any year in the past 2 decades, Mr. Speaker. He talked about hotels. Well, the first 50 are being closed and there are more to come, Mr. Speaker. He talks about the numbers. Well, they were down by over a third last year, Mr. Speaker, the first time that's happened. And then he talked, Mr. Speaker, he talked about smashing the gangs. Well, if he does care about smashing the gangs, why doesn't he own up to the fact that when it came to the Nationality and Borders Act, he blocked, delayed and voted against the powers in that act, which have allowed us to now arrest hundreds and hundreds of people connected with that illegal trade who have been sentenced to hundreds of years in prison. He opposed that because he chooses the criminal gangs over the British people every time.
I mean, we are getting, as you predicted, Tim, a sort of shape of the political attacks from the two sides.
So Starmer's straight in with, you've twisted and turned and changed what you're trying to present to the country. And your basic argument, Rishi Sunak, is that everything's fine and it's not, and the people out there know it's not. You're saying black is white. That's the Starmer kind of assault. And the Sunak defence is all the things you claim you're going to do, we're already doing, have already done, and frankly, you know, you don't really know what you're talking about on that front. And a lot of Tories do find the Labour plan on illegal immigration sort of slightly laughable. You know, the idea that he's going to come in and set up a sort of new unit in the NCA that's going to tackle the gap. There already is a unit in the NCA, and they say we've done all this and we've done the upstream work with the other countries. And Starmer is a bit naive about thinking that that's all going to work. But then he hits him with this: you back the criminal gangs. Now, anyone who's been looking at some of the tabloid newspapers over the last week will have seen a lot of attacks on Starmer working pro bono for killers on death row as part of his campaign against the death penalty. But that is then depicted by The Sun and others, with some help, I suspect, from the Conservative Research Department, to sort of say, this guy supports wrong-uns, and you're going to hear a lot more of that. And Sunak's not pulling his punches there. Whether we get onto any of that material or not in one of his answers, I don't know. I suspect the Tories will be too cute to sort of claim ownership of something that at the moment looks like this. Yes, exactly. Yeah. But that's very much the theme. You can't trust this fella because ultimately he's a do-gooding liberal who puts the rights of killers, paedophiles and illegal migrants ahead of you and your family.
And that then becomes the shape of the election campaign as we see it.